The night was quiet, yet the silence carried a weight that pressed down on everything in sight. A storm was building, not in the sky, but inside hearts that had been scarred too many times. In a small American town tucked between endless fields of corn and the rust-red barns that seemed older than memory, a family carried wounds that no one dared to name aloud. Ethan Ward had grown up with the whispers of his family's tragedy shaping every step he took. People said fate had marked the Wards long before Ethan was born. His grandfather had lost everything in a bitter feud. His father had carried the burden of revenge until it swallowed him whole, and now Ethan was left to stand in the ashes of a legacy that never gave him peace. The Wards were known not for kindness, but for the dark shadow of debts and grudges. The town's council, old men who believed in punishment more than mercy, had their own way of deciding what justice meant. And Ethan, despite his unwillingness, was chained to those decisions. At 27, Ethan was a man torn between the anger that had been planted inside him and the yearning to walk away. His mother, a quiet woman with silver streaks in her hair, reminded him of patience. But patience was something the council never allowed. That night, Ethan's boots echoed against the wooden porch as he stepped outside. His eyes lifted to the dark horizon, the moon hidden behind clouds like a secret. He remembered the words that had been spoken at the last council gathering. The blood debt must be paid. A life for a life. Honor must be restored. The sentence had fallen on him like a chain around his neck. He hated it. Hated the way the council dictated lives as if they were playing pieces on a board. And yet he could not turn away. Because the debt wasn't about him. It was about his father. Years ago, Ethan's father had pulled the trigger in a drunken rage, and a young man from the Sullivan family had fallen. That single act had split the town in two, feeding hatred, until the council stepped in with its brutal verdict. Ethan remembered his father's last words before prison swallowed him. "Son, they'll come for you. Don't let them take everything from us. Don't let them win." And now, standing under the restless sky, Ethan wondered if this was what his father meant. Inside the house, the wooden floor creaked as his mother appeared in the doorway. Her voice was soft, but the weight of her fear made it tremble. "Ethan, don't let them harden you. You are not your father." He closed his eyes, taking a long breath. "They've given me no choice, Ma. You know what they demand." Her hands tightened on the shawl wrapped around her shoulders. "There's always a choice. Violence breeds nothing but more graves." Ethan wanted to believe her. But the image of the Sullivan family sitting in the council chamber, demanding retribution with cold eyes, haunted him. The punishment wasn't money. It wasn't years in prison. No, the council had chosen something far worse. A binding. The old custom no one spoke of in public, but everyone knew existed. To tie two families in a forced union, to end the blood war in a way that left scars deeper than bullets. They had chosen for Ethan to take the Sullivan's daughter. Not in love, not in freedom, but as payment. He had seen her only once across the chamber, her face pale but her chin held high. Her name was Claire Sullivan, a teacher in the town's small schoolhouse, known for her stubborn courage and sharp tongue. People whispered that she was nothing like her family, that she had resisted their hunger for revenge. Yet she had been chosen as the offering. The thought twisted something inside Ethan. To take a woman's life, her freedom, and chain it to his own in the name of justice? It was a cruelty he couldn't stomach. But refusal meant ruin. The council would strip his family of land, of honor, of everything. His mother would be cast into the streets. And so Ethan's nights turned into restless pacing, torn between his conscience and the demands of men who called themselves keepers of order. The day came when the Sullivan men arrived at his porch. 3 of them, tall, broad-shouldered, their eyes burning with restrained anger. Behind them stood Claire, her dress simple, her hair tied back, her face a portrait of calm defiance. Ethan's chest tightened. She was younger than he expected, no more than 23, yet her eyes carried a weight far older. The eldest Sullivan spoke first. His voice was sharp, meant to cut. "The council has spoken. The binding begins tonight. Do you accept?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "I don't accept chains, but I'll bear the burden because you've left me no choice." Claire's gaze flickered to him, a storm hidden behind steady calm. For a moment, Ethan wondered if she hated him already, or if she hated the council more. Inside, his mother stood frozen, her lips moving in silent prayer. The night stretched long. The council gathered in the old courthouse, lanterns glowing against the dark wood walls. Witnesses filled the room, murmuring as if history were being written in front of them. Ethan stood tall, his shoulders rigid, as the councilman read the verdict aloud. Claire was brought forward, her hands clasped, her chin refusing to bow. The ritual words fell heavy. 2 families bound. 1 debt repaid. Peace restored. Ethan's voice, low but steady, answered when he was asked, "Do you accept this binding?" He wanted to scream, to defy, to throw the verdict back in their faces. But then he saw his mother's eyes, pleading, desperate, and he forced the words through clenched teeth. "I accept." Claire's answer came after a pause. Her lips barely moved, but the sound cut through the silence. "I accept." The crowd murmured, some in satisfaction, others in pity. The councilman struck the gavel down, and just like that, their fates were sealed. But in Ethan's heart, a storm raged. He knew this was not the end. It was only the beginning. And as he glanced at Claire, her eyes meeting his with fierce fire, he realized something terrifying. This union might not kill the feud. It might only feed it. The courthouse emptied slowly, whispers trailing behind like smoke. People stared, some with pity, some with cold satisfaction, as Ethan and Claire walked out into the night. The town's air felt different, thick, suffocating, as though the whole world had leaned closer to watch them. Claire walked 2 steps behind him, her dress brushing the dust of the courthouse steps. She held her head high, but Ethan noticed the way her fingers dug into the fabric at her side. He wondered if she wanted to scream. He wondered if she blamed him. Ethan's mother, Margaret Ward, stood at the bottom of the steps. She wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders, her face pale but composed. "Come home," she whispered, though her voice trembled. "Let no one see us broken." The walk to the Ward farmhouse was long, the gravel road crunching under their boots. Claire didn't speak, and Ethan didn't force her. He knew words couldn't mend what had been torn tonight. The farmhouse loomed ahead, old wood creaking against the wind, its windows glowing faintly with the light of kerosene lamps. When Ethan pushed open the door, the familiar scent of pine and smoke wrapped around him. For a moment, he wished he could close his eyes and pretend this was just another evening, not the beginning of a life neither of them had chosen. Claire stepped inside, her gaze sweeping across the modest room. The walls carried photographs of men long gone, their stern faces staring down like judges. Ethan hated those pictures. They reminded him of everything he despised, the legacy of grudges, the suffocating chains of honor. "You can rest here," Ethan said quietly, gesturing toward the smaller room down the hall. "It's yours now." Her eyes flicked to him, sharp, assessing. "And what am I supposed to call this arrangement? A prison, a debt? Or perhaps a curse?" The words stung, though he expected no less. Ethan swallowed hard. "Call it survival." Claire let out a short, bitter laugh. "Survival? They've chained me to the son of the man who murdered my brother. That's not survival, Mr. Ward. That's cruelty dressed up as peace." Ethan's jaw tightened. He wanted to defend himself, to tell her he hadn't pulled the trigger, that he had carried the shame of his father's sins for years. But what good would it do? In her eyes, he was still a Ward. He was still the enemy. "I didn't ask for this," he said finally, his voice low. "Neither did I," she shot back. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with all the unsaid truths neither dared to spill. Margaret stepped in then, her hands wringing nervously. "Enough," she said gently. "No one asked for this, but here we are. Let us not tear each other apart on the first night." Claire turned away, walking toward the room that was now hers. Her back was stiff, her shoulders tense. When the door closed softly behind her, Ethan let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. That night he sat alone on the porch, the stars scattered above like broken glass. The old rocking chair creaked beneath him as he thought about the path ahead. He knew Claire despised him. He couldn't blame her. But somewhere inside, a dangerous thought stirred. What if this union became more than just punishment? What if it changed everything? The days that followed were thick with silence. Claire spoke little, her presence in the house quiet but sharp, like a blade hidden in plain sight. She cooked her own meals, kept to herself, and left early in the mornings to walk to the schoolhouse where she taught children their letters and sums. Ethan watched her from a distance, unsure how to bridge the gulf between them. He wanted to apologize, though the words felt useless. He wanted to offer her freedom, though he had none to give. One evening, he found her on the porch, grading papers by the fading light. Her brow was furrowed, her lips pressed in concentration. For a moment, Ethan simply watched, struck by the strength she carried in her stillness. "Claire," he said finally, his voice cautious. She didn't look up. "If you've come to remind me I belong here, don't bother. The council already made sure of that. I came to say—" He hesitated, struggling to find words that wouldn't sound hollow. "I'm sorry. For everything. For what my father did. For what this town demands. For dragging you into it." Her pen paused mid-mark. Slowly, she raised her eyes to his, and for the first time, he saw something beyond anger. Weariness. Pain. "Do you think sorry changes the grave my brother lies in?" she asked softly. "No," Ethan admitted, his throat tight. "But it's all I have to give." For a heartbeat, neither of them spoke. Then Claire looked away, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't hate you, Ethan. I hate what they've done to us. What they've turned us into." The words struck deep. For the first time, Ethan realized she wasn't just his enemy. She was another prisoner of the council's cruelty. The town, however, wasn't so quick to forget. Everywhere Ethan and Claire went, eyes followed. Whispers curled through the streets like smoke. Children stared. Women crossed to the other side of the road. Men muttered under their breath. The council had demanded peace, but peace was an illusion. One afternoon, while Ethan was repairing the fence near the barn, a group of Sullivan men rode up. Their horses kicked up dust as they reined in, their expressions hard and unfriendly. "Ward," one of them spat. "How does it feel chaining our blood to yours? Think this makes us even?" Ethan stood slowly, wiping sweat from his brow. His gaze was steady, his voice firm. "I didn't ask for this binding." "You know that," the man sneered. "Maybe not. But you benefit from it. You keep your land, your name, your pride. Wow, we lost a son." Before Ethan could reply, Claire stepped out from the house. Her eyes flashed as she faced her kin. "Enough, this isn't justice. It's cruelty, and you know it." The Sullivan men stared at her, stunned. One of them growled, "Don't forget where you belong, Claire." Her chin lifted. "I belong where I choose. And right now, I choose not to let you poison me with more hate." The men exchanged dark looks before turning their horses. Dust rose as they rode off, leaving tension thick in the air. Ethan looked at Claire, something like admiration flickering in his chest. She had defended him, against her own blood. "Why did you do that?" he asked quietly. Claire crossed her arms, her eyes still fierce. "Because hate will bury us all. And I refuse to dig another grave." For the first time since their binding, Ethan felt a spark of something he hadn't dared to hope for. Not forgiveness, not yet. But perhaps the beginning of understanding. That night, as the wind howled outside and the farmhouse groaned against the storm, Ethan lay awake listening to the rain hammer the roof. His mind replayed every word, every look Claire had given him. He knew the road ahead was dark, filled with suspicion and whispers. But he also knew this truth. For the first time in years, he felt he was no longer standing alone in the storm. And that terrified him more than anything else. The storm passed, but it left the town soaked and restless. The roads were muddy, the fields heavy with water, and the Ward farmhouse smelled faintly of damp wood. Ethan rose early as he always did, but that morning felt different. There was a shift in the air, a weight pressing on him. Claire was already awake, her hair loose around her shoulders as she moved quietly through the kitchen. She didn't look up when he entered, but he noticed the faint dark circles under her eyes. She hadn't slept much either. "You should rest," Ethan said softly. Claire's hands paused on the kettle, her back stiff. "Rest isn't something I can afford." "Not here?" He frowned. "What do you mean?" She turned then, her gaze sharp but tired. "Every day I walk into that schoolhouse, and every parent looks at me like I'm tainted. Some whisper that I've betrayed my family. Others call me a ward now like it's poison. Do you know what that feels like?" Ethan's jaw clenched. He did know. He had lived it his whole life. But hearing it from her lips, knowing she was now forced to carry the same burden, cut deeper than he expected. "I know it feels like a prison," he admitted. "But you're stronger than they are. I saw it in you when you faced your kin the other day." Her eyes softened for a fleeting second before she turned back to the kettle. "Strength doesn't protect you from loneliness, Ethan. It doesn't protect you from hate." He didn't reply. Instead, he watched the way her hands trembled slightly as she poured the tea. For all her fire, Claire was bleeding inside. Later that day, Ethan hitched up the old truck and drove into town for supplies. Claire insisted on coming along, despite his hesitation. "If I hide," she told him, "then they win." The main street was alive with Saturday bustle, shopkeepers, sweeping their storefronts, farmers bartering, children darting between horses and wagons. But when Ethan and Claire stepped out of the truck, silence rippled down the street. Heads turned. Conversations stalled. Ethan kept his chin high, ignoring the stares, but Claire felt them burn against her skin. She walked beside him, her steps steady, though every muscle screamed to run. Inside the general store, the whispers grew louder. That's her. The Sullivan girl chained to a ward. Poor thing. Or maybe she deserves it. Claire's hands tightened around the basket she carried. Ethan noticed, his anger boiling. He turned sharply toward the nearest whisperer, an old man leaning against a barrel. You got something to say? Ethan's voice was low, dangerous. The man shrugged, feigning innocence. Just seems wrong is all. Blood mixing where it shouldn't. Before Ethan could reply, Claire stepped forward. Her voice was calm but cold. Wrong is watching men turn pain into entertainment. Wrong is punishing children for sins they didn't commit. If you can't see that, maybe it's not my binding you. Should be whispering about it's your own conscience. The man's face reddened, and he muttered something under his breath before turning away. The room fell silent again, but this time the whispers didn't return. Ethan looked at Claire, a mix of pride and awe flickering across his face. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did, she said firmly. Because if I stay silent, then they'll think they can break me. And I won't let them. By the time they returned home, the tension between them had shifted. Not gone, but altered. Claire sat on the porch steps as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in streaks of orange and red. Ethan joined her, leaning against the railing. Why did you really stand up for me back there? He asked quietly. She didn't look at him, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Because I'm tired of letting them write our story for us. They've taken enough. My brother, your father, our freedom. If we let them take our voices too, then what's left of us? Her words struck something deep within him. For years, Ethan had carried his father's sins like shackles. But now, sitting beside Claire, he wondered if there was another way. Maybe we could write a new story, he said, almost to himself. Claire's head turned then, her eyes searching his. And what would that story be, Ethan? Two enemies forced into chains who somehow find peace? Do you really believe that's possible? He held her gaze, his voice steady. I don't know, but I want to believe it. The silence stretched, heavy with unspoken thoughts. Then Claire stood abruptly, brushing the dust from her dress. Belief isn't enough. Actions are what matter. She walked inside, leaving Ethan with the echo of her words. The following week brought new challenges. A letter arrived from the council, summoning Ethan to the courthouse. Claire found him reading it at the kitchen table, his expression grim. What is it? She asked. The Sullivans filed a complaint, Ethan said bitterly. They claim I'm not fulfilling the binding, that I'm dishonoring the agreement. Claire's brow furrowed. What do they mean? They expected us to live like man and wife. Not just under the same roof, but... His voice trailed off, heavy with implication. Claire's face paled, but her jaw tightened. So now they want to dictate even that? Ethan slammed the letter down. I won't let them use you like that. Not as payment. Not as property. For a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Gratitude, maybe even trust. Then what will you do? I'll go, he said firmly. I'll face them. And I'll make it clear they don't control what happens in my house. The courthouse was packed when Ethan arrived, Claire at his side. The Sullivan men sat in the front, their eyes sharp with accusation. The councilman banged his gavel, calling the room to order. Ethan Ward, the councilman intoned. You've been accused of dishonoring the binding. The Sullivans claim you've refused your duties as husband. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Claire's face burned with shame, but she stood tall, refusing to bow her head. Ethan stepped forward, his voice ringing clear. The council ordered peace, not ownership. You bound us to end the feud, not to satisfy your thirst for power. Claire is not a prize to be claimed. She's a human being. And if this council thinks it can dictate what happens in my home, then maybe you're not seeking peace at all. You're seeking control. The room erupted in murmurs. Some nodded in agreement, others glared with fury. The councilman's gavel struck again, demanding silence. This council demands respect, he said coldly. If you defy our authority, you defy the town itself. Ethan's jaw tightened. He glanced at Claire, then back at the council. Then so be it. Because I'd rather defy you than destroy her. The words hung in the air, heavy and dangerous. The councilman's face darkened, but he said nothing further. The hearing was adjourned with no resolution, the tension left to fester. As they left the courthouse, Claire walked beside Ethan in silence. Finally, outside in the fading light, she spoke. "You risked everything today?" "I'd risk it again," he replied without hesitation. For the first time, Claire's lips curved into the faintest trace of a smile. "Maybe," she whispered, "we really can write a new story." Ethan's chest tightened, hope sparking where despair had lived for so long. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but tonight, for the first time, it felt like they weren't enemies bound by chains. They were something else, something fragile, something dangerous, something that could either save them or destroy them both. The storm had passed, leaving the streets washed clean and shimmering under the pale glow of street lamps. Yet inside Emily's chest the storm raged on, unrelenting. She sat by the window of her small apartment, knees tucked to her chest, eyes fixated on the neon signs flickering across the avenue. The silence was suffocating. Every breath echoed against her ribs as though the air itself carried memories she had tried so hard to bury. No matter how tightly she closed her eyes, the images returned. Victor's bloodied shirt, the sharp crack of a gunshot splitting the night, her brother's trembling hands as he begged her to run, and then the promise, the vow whispered into the dark, "I will find him. I will make him pay." But now there was Daniel. Daniel with his quiet steadiness, the way his eyes softened when he looked at her, as though he saw not the scars but the woman beneath. Daniel who had stood between her and danger more than once, who had made her laugh even when laughter felt like betrayal. The longer she stayed, the deeper she fell into the orbit of his presence, and the more treacherous her heart became. "Damn you, Daniel," she whispered, though the curse carried no venom. Her throat ached with the weight of everything unspoken. Why did you have to make this so hard? A knock at the door startled her. She froze, heartbeat spiking, instinct screaming at her to hide. No one came here. She had kept this place a secret, even from the neighbors. Another knock followed, this time firmer. "Emily, it's me." Her breath rushed out in a shaky sigh. She opened the door to find Daniel standing there, rain still clinging to his jacket, his expression taut with worry. "You didn't answer your phone." His voice was low but urgent. "I had to make sure you were safe." "I was thinking," she said, her words faltering. She stepped aside to let him in. His presence filled the room, grounding and unsettling all at once. Daniel scanned her face, then the room, as though searching for signs of danger. Satisfied, he shrugged off his jacket and draped it over the back of the chair. "You've been distant since last night." "Talk to me, Emily, please." She hugged her knees tighter. "I don't know what to say." "Then start with the truth." The truth. 2 words that felt like knives. She wanted to tell him everything, that her name wasn't even Emily, that the blood feud she carried was older than their connection, that her heart was torn between vengeance and the fragile hope he offered. But the truth would put him in danger, and she couldn't bear the thought of his life shattered because of her. Her silence stretched until it became unbearable. Daniel sat beside her, close but not touching, giving her space yet refusing to leave. His hand hovered near hers, hesitant, trembling. "You don't have to carry this alone," he said finally. "Whatever it is, let me in." She looked at him then, really looked, the shadow of his jawline, the sincerity etched in every line of his face. Her chest tightened with a painful tenderness. She wanted to reach for him, to believe that maybe love could heal what hatred had broken. But she was bound by promises carved into her soul with fire and blood. "I can't," she whispered, tears pricking her eyes. "Not yet." Daniel's shoulders sagged, but he didn't press further. Instead, he wrapped his arm around her, a quiet shield against the chaos in her head. She let herself lean into him, if only for a moment, her cheek pressed against the warmth of his chest. His heartbeat was steady, unwavering, and for that fleeting second she wished she could stay there forever. But forever wasn't hers to have. Across the city, in the dimly lit back room of a cigar lounge, Victor leaned over a table cluttered with maps and photographs. His hand, adorned with a heavy gold ring, traced the lines of the city streets. Every red mark, every circle, was a piece of a puzzle, and Emily was at the center. "She's resurfaced," one of his men reported. "Been spotted near the East End, same place Daniel's been seen." Victor's lips curved into a cruel smile. "Of course she's with him. Foolish girl thinks she can hide in plain sight." He tapped the map with his finger. "She wants revenge, but she doesn't realize she's playing my game." The man shifted nervously. "What do you want us to do?" Victor leaned back, smoke curling from the cigar between his fingers. We wait. Let her think she's safe. The deeper she falls, the more it will hurt when I take everything from her. He exhaled a cloud of smoke, eyes glittering with malice. Especially him. The following days blurred into a fragile routine. Emily returned to work, Daniel shadowing her more often than not. Their conversations grew cautious, laced with unsaid words, yet a bond pulsed between them, undeniable and dangerous. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Daniel surprised her with a drive. No questions, he said, holding up a hand when she raised a brow. Just trust me. They ended up at the edge of the city, where fields stretched wide and fireflies danced in the twilight. Emily stepped out of the car, her breath catching at the unexpected beauty. For once, the air smelled of grass and earth, not asphalt and fear. Why are we here? She asked. Because you needed to breathe, Daniel replied simply. He joined her, hands in his pockets, gaze on the horizon. I don't know what demons you're fighting, Emily, but I do know you deserve a moment that's yours. No shadows, no ghosts. Just this. Her throat tightened. How could he give so freely when she was built of secrets? How could she allow herself to want this, knowing it could all end in blood? Yet the yearning was too strong. She reached for his hand, hesitating only a heartbeat before her fingers brushed his. Daniel's hand closed around hers, warm and steady. They stood in silence, the sky burning with streaks of orange and purple, two souls caught between past and possibility. For the first time in years, Emily felt the weight of vengeance lift, replaced by something softer, something terrifying, hope. But hope was dangerous. That night, as she lay in bed replaying the evening, a text flashed across her phone. Unknown number. Her blood ran cold as she read the words. Did you think I wouldn't find you? Your brother begged for mercy. You'll have none. V? Her hands shook, phone slipping from her grasp. Victor had found her. Worse, he knew where she was. Every wall she had built, every disguise crumbled in an instant. Tears blurred her vision as dread consumed her. This wasn't just her fight anymore. Daniel was in the crosshairs now. And if Victor took him, if she lost Daniel, too, she didn't know if she'd survive it. The next morning, Daniel noticed the change. She was jumpy, pale, her eyes rimmed with shadows. Emily, what happened? Nothing, she lied too quickly. But Daniel wasn't a fool. He stepped closer, cupping her face in his hands. Don't shut me out. Not now. Her resolve cracked. She pressed the phone into his palm, unable to speak. His eyes darkened as he read the message, jaw tightening with fury. We go to the police, he said firmly. No! Panic flared in her chest. You don't understand. Victor owns half the force. If they know, he'll find us faster. Her voice broke. He'll kill you. Daniel's grip tightened. Then let him try. I'm not letting him hurt you. Not again. His certainty both warmed and terrified her. She wanted to believe he could protect her, that they could stand against Victor together. But deep down, she knew the truth. This war had begun long before Daniel, and it would end only with blood. Still, when Daniel pulled her into his arms, she let herself believe, for just a moment, that maybe love could rewrite destiny. But destiny had already drawn its lines. Far across the city, Victor placed a call, his smile sharp as a blade. It's time. Bring them both to me, alive. The game had begun, and Emily's fragile sanctuary was about to shatter. The night fell heavy over the city, wrapping its towers in a thick veil of neon and silence. Emily stood by Daniel's window, her reflection staring back at her with hollow eyes. Victor's message pulsed in her head like a wound that refused to heal. Every heartbeat was an echo of the promise she had made the night her brother died. Revenge had been her compass, her reason to survive. But now there was Daniel. Behind her, Daniel moved restlessly, checking the locks, loading the weapon he had pulled from a hidden drawer. His hands were steady, but his jaw was tight with a fury he could barely contain. You're not safe here, he said at last, his voice a low growl. We need to leave. Tonight. Pack whatever you can. Emily turned to face him. And go where? He'll find us, Daniel. No matter where we run, Victor will always be one step behind. Daniel stopped pacing, his gaze locked on hers, unyielding. Then we don't run. We make our stand. The words hung in the air, sharp and final. Emily's throat constricted. This was her fight, her burden born of blood and grief. To drag Daniel into it felt like betrayal. And yet, when she looked into his eyes, she saw not fear, but determination. He had chosen her despite the danger. Perhaps because of it. "You don't understand," she whispered. "If we face him, he'll kill you. He'll take everything from me just to watch me break." Daniel stepped closer, his hand brushing her cheek. "He won't. Not as long as I'm breathing. Emily, I'm not afraid of him. I'm afraid of losing you." Her chest ached at his words, raw and earnest. She wanted to tell him everything. How her real name was Amelia. How her brother had died at Victor's hands. How the weight of vengeance had consumed her for years. But the words lodged in her throat, trapped by fear. Instead, she leaned into his touch, closing her eyes as his forehead rested against hers. For a moment, the world stilled, and all that existed was the fragile promise between them. A sudden crash shattered the silence. The window exploded inward, shards of glass scattering across the floor. Emily gasped as masked figures poured into the apartment, guns raised. Daniel reacted instantly, pulling her down behind the couch as bullets tore through the air. The deafening roar of gunfire filled the room. "Stay down!" Daniel shouted, returning fire with lethal precision. One intruder collapsed, another staggered back, but more surged forward. Emily's heart pounded. This was it. Victor had come for her. The war she had carried in her chest was now spilling into reality. She grabbed a fallen weapon, her hands trembling. Memories flashed, her brother's blood, his dying plea. "Fight for me!" Gritting her teeth, she rose just enough to fire, her shot striking one of the attackers in the shoulder. The man screamed, dropping his gun. Daniel glanced at her, eyes blazing with both pride and terror. "You can shoot?" "Learned the hard way," she muttered, chambering another round. The fight raged, the apartment a battlefield of shattered glass and gunpowder. Finally, the last intruder fell, the silence that followed as heavy as the ringing in Emily's ears. Smoke curled in the air, mingling with the sharp scent of blood. Emily lowered the weapon, her hands shaking uncontrollably. Daniel rushed to her side, checking her over. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, though her chest felt crushed beneath invisible weight. "He's not going to stop," she whispered. This was just the beginning. Daniel pulled her into his arms, his heartbeat pounding against hers. "Then we finish it." Victor sat in his mansion, swirling a glass of whiskey when the call came. "They survived," his man reported, voice trembling. "The attack failed." Victor's smile twisted into something cold and cruel. "Good." He set the glass down with a deliberate clink. "Let them think they've won a battle. It will make the fall that much sweeter. Sir, should we send reinforcements?" Victor lit a cigar, eyes gleaming in the dim light. "No, bring them to me alive. I want her to see what becomes of those who defy me. And him," his lips curled. "He'll be the message." In the days that followed, Emily and Daniel lived like fugitives, moving from safe house to safe house. Every shadow seemed to hold eyes, every sound a threat. Yet in the stolen moments between chaos, they found something neither expected: solace in each other's presence. One night, as they lay on the floor of an abandoned warehouse, Daniel reached for her hand. "Tell me the truth, Emily, all of it, please." The dam inside her broke. In halting whispers, she told him everything: her brother's death, her vow for revenge, her real name. Daniel listened without interruption, his thumb brushing soothing circles over her hand. When she finished, her tears spilling freely, he leaned in and pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Amelia," he whispered, using her true name for the first time, "you're not alone anymore. We end this together." Her heart swelled with a mixture of relief and fear. For the first time, she wasn't carrying the burden alone. But that also meant she had more to lose. The showdown came sooner than expected. A message arrived, an address scrawled in blood-red ink. No signature was needed. Victor was calling her out. Daniel loaded the weapons, his face grim. "It's a trap." "I know," Amelia said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "But if we don't go, he'll keep hunting us. He'll never stop." Daniel met her gaze, his eyes burning with fierce devotion. "Then we go. But we go on our terms." The warehouse was empty when they arrived, its cavernous space echoing with their footsteps. Shadows loomed from every corner, the air thick with anticipation. Amelia's grip on her weapon tightened. "Victor!" she called, her voice echoing. "I'm here. Show yourself." A slow clap answered her. From the darkness, Victor emerged, flanked by armed men. His smile was razor-sharp, his presence commanding. "Ah, Amelia." he drawled, savoring her real name. I was beginning to think you'd forgotten me. Her blood boiled at the sound of his voice. You murdered my brother. Victor spread his hands in mock innocence. Business, my dear. Nothing personal. But you've made it personal. His gaze flicked to Daniel. And you've brought company. How touching. Daniel raised his gun, unflinching. This ends tonight. Victor chuckled, a sound devoid of humor. You think love will save you? No, love is weakness. And weakness is what gets you killed. The standoff crackled with tension, seconds stretching like lifetimes. Then, all at once, the room erupted into chaos. Gunfire lit the darkness, shouts echoing off the walls. Amelia moved like a woman possessed, her shots precise, fueled by years of rage. Daniel fought at her side, a force of unyielding protection. But Victor was no ordinary enemy. He moved through the fight with calculated cruelty, always just out of reach, always one step ahead. Amelia's breath burned in her lungs as she reloaded, her eyes locking on Victor. This was the moment she had lived for, the moment her brother's ghost demanded. Yet when she finally had him in her sights, finger on the trigger, a terrifying thought pierced her mind. If I kill him, what's left of me? Her hesitation cost her. Victor lunged, knocking the gun from her hand. His grip closed around her throat, forcing her back against the wall. His face hovered inches from hers, eyes gleaming with triumph. You were never strong enough, he hissed. Amelia clawed at his arm, vision blurring. Then a gunshot split the air. Victor staggered, his grip loosening. Behind him, Daniel stood, smoke curling from his barrel. Victor turned, rage twisting his features. Another shot rang out. This time, Amelia fired. The bullet struck true. Victor collapsed, his body hitting the floor with a final, echoing thud. Silence fell. Amelia stood frozen, chest heaving, staring at the man who had haunted her every nightmare. It was over. The war was done. Yet instead of triumph, she felt only emptiness. Her brother was still gone. No bullet could change that. Daniel stepped to her side, his hand steady on her back. It's over, he whispered. You're free. Her knees buckled and she sank against him, sobs breaking free. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to grieve, not just for her brother, but for the girl she had been before vengeance consumed her. Daniel held her, his embrace fierce and unyielding. And though the warehouse reeked of smoke and blood, for Amelia, it felt like the first breath of peace she had ever known. But deep in her chest, she knew the battle scars would never fully fade. The past had carved its mark. What came next, the life she and Daniel might build, would depend on whether love could truly heal what hate had broken. The abandoned factory loomed like a graveyard of steel and concrete, its rusted walls whispering echoes of forgotten battles. Emily tightened her grip on the pistol at her side, every sense sharpened by the storm of adrenaline coursing through her. Daniel stood just ahead, scanning the shadows, his every movement taut with purpose. The air smelled of rust, oil, and inevitability. This is it, he murmured. Victor won't expect us to face him here. He thinks we're still running. Emily's voice was steady, though her insides churned. Then we use that. No more running, no more hiding. This ends tonight. Inside, the factory was a labyrinth of broken machinery and hollow corridors. Their footsteps echoed, each one a countdown to confrontation. Emily's heart pounded, not just with fear, but with something fiercer. Resolve. She had lived too long as a survivor, defined by the man who hunted her. Now she was here to reclaim her life, no matter the cost. Victor's arrival was heralded by the sound of engines. Black SUVs rolled to a stop outside the factory, headlights cutting through the dark. Dozens of men poured out, armed and ruthless, their boots striking the ground in unison. At their center emerged Victor himself, tall, sharp in his tailored suit, the embodiment of power wrapped in malice. His smile was razor-thin as he surveyed the factory. So predictable, he drawled, his voice carrying across the space. You always return to places like this, ruins, ashes, because that's what you are. Emily, ashes of what was once whole. Emily stepped from the shadows, Daniel at her side. Her gun was steady, her eyes colder than he remembered. And yet here I stand. Victor's gaze flicked to Daniel with disdain. Ah, the night. Tell me, boy, how many corpses are you willing to add to your crusade for love? Do you think she will save you? She destroys everything she touches. Daniel's reply was sharp, unyielding. Better destroyed with her than alive under you. Victor's laugh echoed, dark and hollow. Then let us finish this farce. He gestured, and his men surged forward. The battle ignited like wildfire. Bullets tore through the air, sparking against steel and concrete. Emily moved with precision, each shot fueled by years of rage and grief. Daniel fought like a man possessed, fists and bullets cutting through enemies with brutal efficiency. The factory became an arena, every corridor a gauntlet of violence. But Victor didn't join the fray immediately. He watched, savoring the chaos, sipping from the chalice of control. Only when the first wave of his men fell, leaving silence punctuated by groans of the dying, did he step forward. "Impressive," he said, clapping slowly. "But skill won't save you, Emily. You're too broken to win." Emily's chest heaved, sweat and blood streaking her skin. She leveled her pistol at him. "I'm broken because of you. And tonight I break free." Victor's eyes gleamed. "Then prove it." The duel was merciless. Victor moved with lethal grace, a blade flashing in his hand. Emily dodged, the steel slicing past her cheek, drawing blood. Pain flared, but she held her ground, firing at close range. Victor twisted, the bullet grazing his arm. He laughed as if pain were nothing but fuel. Daniel charged, tackling Victor to the ground. The two men grappled, fists striking like thunder, each blow a contest of dominance. Victor was stronger, more ruthless, his years of cruelty honed into brute skill. But Daniel had something Victor lacked, purpose beyond himself. Emily scrambled for her weapon, but a shout stopped her. A surviving guard lunged, knocking her flat. The gun skidded across the floor. They wrestled, the man's hands closing around her throat. Stars exploded in her vision as she fought for air, clawing, kicking. Desperation lent her strength, and her hand found a shard of glass. With a primal cry, she drove it into his neck. The man collapsed, blood pooling, and Emily gasped for breath. She looked up just in time to see Victor pin Daniel against the wall, his blade pressing to his throat. "You're nothing!" Victor snarled. "You think love gives you strength? Love is weakness." Emily's body moved before her mind caught up. She seized the fallen pistol, aimed, and fired. The shot rang out like judgment. The bullet struck Victor in the shoulder, spinning him away from Daniel. He roared, staggering, his grip on the knife faltering. Daniel surged forward, slamming Victor to the ground. The knife skittered away, and the two men rolled in a vicious struggle. Emily ran to them, her gun raised, heart hammering. Victor's hand shot up, catching Daniel by the throat. His face twisted with fury. "If I go down, I take him with me." Emily's finger tightened on the trigger. Time seemed to slow, the rise and fall of Victor's chest. Daniel's strangled gasp, the blood dripping from Emily's wound. And then the gun roared again. The bullet pierced Victor's chest. His eyes widened, shock etched across his face. For the first time, the predator knew fear. He released Daniel, clutching at the wound, gasping like a man drowning. His gaze found Emily one last time. "This isn't over," he rasped. Then he collapsed, lifeless, into the dirt and blood of the factory floor. The silence afterward was deafening. Emily stood frozen, gun still raised, her body trembling as though the earth itself shook beneath her. Daniel staggered to her side, his chest heaving, his throat bruised. "It's over," he said, his voice raw. Her eyes filled with tears, disbelief and relief colliding. She lowered the gun, letting it fall from her hand. "It's over," she whispered. They clung to each other amid the wreckage, two souls battered but unbroken. The factory smelled of blood and smoke, yet for Emily, the air felt lighter than it had in years. The shadow of Victor had finally been lifted. Morning crept through the broken windows, painting the floor in streaks of gold. They walked out together, leaving the ruin behind. The city stretched ahead, uncertain, dangerous, alive. Emily's steps felt unsteady, but her heart carried something new. Freedom. On the road, Daniel glanced at her, his bruised face softening with a weary smile. "Where do we go now?" Emily looked at the horizon, the dawn reflecting in her eyes. "Anywhere, everywhere, as long as it's ours." He reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining. In the silence between them, promises unspoken carried more weight than words. They had faced death, loss, and shadows together. And from that crucible, they emerged not unscarred, but stronger. Victor had sought to break them. Instead, he had forged them. Love was not weakness. Love was defiance. And as they disappeared into the light of a new day, Emily knew this was not the end of their story, only the beginning of something reborn from ashes. The final chapter of vengeance had closed, and the first chapter of freedom had begun,